Hey there, friends. This is Bill MacDonald. Welcome to today's version of multitasking in the ER, the editing and reading emergency room. I'm going to use a passage from the third grade reading test. And so if you teach fourth grade or higher, your third graders will never get this as a benchmark or a field test. I wouldn't think that would be appropriate. I guess you could practice with it, but I would recommend that you use this poem as a non-example. The first thing we're going to do is answer the two questions that were very difficult. They were the third and fourth most difficult questions on the reading test. And I'm noticing that more and more it's poems and the author's intended meaning or the reader's interpretation of what the author is trying to get across, the picture that the author is trying to paint. There's not enough understanding of the content of poems. And so I really think we need to do a lot of extra time, ET, not the alien, but ET, extra time or extra times working on poems. And so I'm going to show you a way. Part one of this video is going to be the two questions that got 41 and 43% having to do with visualization and the senses, the setting of the poem. The second part has to do with fixing run-ons in 3 or 4 different ways. And the third part I'm going to do with you guys is going to be how can you work as a class with a group, with a partner, and then working solo so you can graduate to independent learning where it's not always teacher directed. Sometimes in that classroom, there's too much modeling and never any independent practice. And sometimes there's never any modeling or mentoring, and there's only independent practice where we're just assigning worksheets. Well, let's learn some ways that will help the kids fix adult work. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the poem. I have it ready on my document camera that was so generously donated by one of you out there. The reason I circled the word which on question number 15 is I told you that we need to get used to all of the questions having to do with the keywords who, what, when, where, which, why, how. And the two questions that did poorly on the third grade test, one of them was which of these 4, and the other question, it doesn't have the words there, but the word that they're asking basically is how the leaves are able to be pictured by you, the reader. Okay, all right. So the question says, if I read the question softly or loudly, which sentence, singular, best describes the stanzas of the poem? Stanzas, plural. Poem. Remember, this is my poem, and we have passages that have introductions, bodies, conclusions. We have paragraphs that have a topic sentence, supporting sentences, and closing sentences. We have plays that have beginnings, middles, and ends. And we have poems that have P for poem and P for passage, paragraph, poem, and play, and lots of other P's that we'll talk about as we get to them. But this one's going to be about a picture. What picture is the author painting? So I want you to notice all 4 letter choices at each stanza. And I didn't agree with this part of the statement because one of the stanzas, if you're going to number lines, then they will be part of stanzas. Okay, the first one says, they have lines that rhyme. Okay, that means all four or all five stanzas have to have rhyming. That's what each means. All four have to create an image. All five have to create an image, a picture for the reader. All four have to have a new event, something happening, or all four repeat important lines. Okay, all five. Okay, and what I want you to think about is arms. And I had showed you my graphic organizer. There's the redevising graphic organizer. There's technically 5 stanzas. Okay, and when we look at them, you're going to notice that the 5 senses, some of them are going to come out. We can also check the P, the point of view. It was from first person because the pronoun I is used at the beginning. And another P of poem is that it's a poem that we're going to be looking at. So what they want to know is all the stanzas, all of them have to have one of those 4 things being true. And so if we use each finger as one of the 5 stanzas, we'll be able to hashtag something on these fingers if we wanted to. Okay, so let's take a look and see something about all 5 stanzas. And the first time through, I'm not going to focus on any grammar. I'm just going to focus on something. And I want you to notice I drew some eyeballs on stanzas 2, 3, 4, and I drew ears on stanza 5. And on stanza 1, I drew ears with a question mark forward and backwards because you're hearing a sound, automatopoeia, but you don't know what the sound is. Okay. I also want you to notice, because we're going to get into it later, I have this yellow eyeball that I bought at Dollar Tree. And you're going to notice that there's 1 comma at the end of the second stanza. And if you look closely with your eyeballs, you won't see a stop sign, a red period, until the end of the poem. 81 words. And if you include the title, 82, 83, you don't need punctuation on a poem on the title necessarily by Yoshika Uchida, something like that. So we'll work on that 1 period problem and 1 slowing down comma problem in a little bit. I do suggest that you go to Dollar Tree, and they sell these about 10 or 20 for $1 in yellow and red for slowing down the sentence with yellow punctuation and stopping the sentence with red. All right. So Crunch, capital Autumn Capital Walk by Yoshika Uchida. Crunch, 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 crunch. I didn't see anything. I heard something, but since I don't know what it is, I put little question marks on ears. Okay. First person, love the sound my feet can make when the leaves turn red and yellow and brown. I can see that happening. Eyeballs. 21 words have passed so far without a period. And one dark night, the wind blows hard, whirling them around once onto the walks and streets where they tumble and gather in piles and drifts. I can see that. Okay. Stanza 1, 2, 3, stanza 4. Just waiting for me and my marching feet to come shuffling and scuffling and stomping up and down. You can see them waiting, and you can hear the shuffling and scuffling and the stomping up and down. So I'll be able to see and hear. So I have an eyeball and an ear there, making a wonderful crunching sound. And I didn't put a question mark because we know now that it's these leaves that are making the sound. So we get to hear and know what we're hearing. crunching sound, crunch, 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 crunch. And going to the last part, me and my feet and my dry brown leaves, period. So all in all, 81, 83, and I live in the Rio Grande Valley, and we have an expressway called Expressway 83. And I think the author of this poem probably thought that instead of writing a poem, they were building an expressway where you never stop for a period until the end of the expressway. It should be that you stop for a period at the end of every sentence. But what we're going to do when we fix this, we're, as in we are, contraction, is after each stanza, we're going to build a stop sign in class, group, partner, and solo formats. So if we take a look at the question, it said, all of the stanzas create lines that rhyme. There were no stanzas that had lines that rhyme whatsoever. So I'm going to eliminate that on the right-hand side. They create an image for the reader. Well, if we're being honest, that first stanza, I couldn't see anything. I could only hear something. And so, to be honest, unless we're using the title that we're going for a walk, I guess we could see somebody going for a walk in the autumn, in the fall. And just a real quick TMI, teachable moment of instruction. You don't normally capitalize winter, summer, spring, or fall. You don't capitalize autumn. You don't capitalize the 4 seasons unless it's the name of a hotel or the title of a work, or in this case, a title of a poem. Okay, so we do have capital letters there, so we'll underline capitals and titles. So 4 out of the 5. So whenever something is mostly true, because in my opinion, they messed this up by saying each stanza, if lines 1 through 4 are a stanza, then I only hear noises. I only hear automatopoeia. I don't see anything. So I didn't, if I'm honest, there was not an image that was created. There was just a sound that was created in my mind, something crunching, but I don't know if I'm eating popcorn or stepping on things, if there's an accident going on. Letter C describes a new event. Well, unfortunately, since the stanza 1 and stanza 5 pretty much repeat each other with the crunching, that wouldn't be true. And there's not new events because the first and the last, the beginning and the end, are repetitive of each other. So in the same way that I wouldn't want you to write an essay that's repetitive, I wouldn't want you to have a poem that's repetitive. So I'm going to eliminate letter C because there's no new event at the beginning and at the end, because the stanza 5 repeats the automatopoeia. Each stanza repeats important lines. The only repeating, like I said, every single stanza does not repeat. Only lines 1 and stanza 1 and stanza 5 repeat. So if I'm going to pick one based on the one that's the most true, I would go ahead and select B, fill it in, circle it like I'm pretending to bubble, place my 15B, and make 25B in the book, so that I can make sure that my 25B in my document on my computer or in my Scantron for those that are still testing on paper. this year is in the right place. Okay, so if you keep this in mind, that was my hand, my palm. We were talking about a poem, and the point of view was from the person who wrote it, because they said I, their perspective, and they were written in stanzas. And so the only one that was really true was letter B. So if that's my hand, then my arm, singular, could be turned into arms, plural, so that we could write artists remember more senses and setting. Setting is the see, taste, touch. So if you look at the bottom portion of the graphical organizer, it has arms already. Artists remember more. And you could put a lot of S's here. It's the setting, which we talked about, the senses, the stanzas. What are they saying in those stanzas? The scenes in a play, the summaries of the passage. If any time that you have a story, you could act it out, or you could draw a picture. You could draw a comic strip where you could have a sequence of the events that are happening if you're not willing to act it out. So, in my opinion, the best answer is letter B, 26. Read lines 15 through 17 of the poem. Okay. It's in a box. Top. There's my box. Whatever it says in the box, I'll write there. And then we figure out, well, what stanza? It's lines 15 through 17. And let's see what it says. They tumble, they gather in piles and drifts. So tumbling is an action. Gathering is an action. What are they gathering in? They're gathering in piles. I know what those are, because we're talking about leaves getting in piles. And they gather in drifts. And since I'm allowed to use my dictionary, I know that drift is a verb when something drifts in the water. So if I have to look up the noun drift, multiple meaning words, to find out what that is. And so lines 15 through 17, if we look right here, they're in stanza 1, 2, 3. Okay, so right here, it said that they were tumbling. The leaves were tumbling. They were gathering. You can see them gather. And we can see them getting in piles. And we can see them getting in drifts, whatever that is, when we look it up. All right. So let's take a look at our answer choices then. These lines help the reader picture the way the leaves, how the leaves are colored. Okay. Since colored is something you see and only actions are mentioned, tumbling and gathering, I don't think anything has to do with color. How they look along the street. Could you see the tumbling? Yes. You could draw a picture of it. Could you see the gathering and the piles? Yes. And you could draw a picture of that. So I could pick that. The sound as they fall, tumbling, it doesn't have any automatopoeia in these lines. There's no noise, gathering in piles, and so there's nothing mentioned about noises, how they feel in the darkness. No, we're not able to touch them. We're only able to see this happening. And so your kids are going to have to use, again, artists remember more, senses setting. Senses are what you see, taste, smell, hear, and touch. And so if your kids were to paint a picture, artists remember more setting, then you could draw a picture of the leaves in piles. Tumbling would be the first picture. Piles of gathering into little piles would be the second picture. Okay? And so the best answer in this one, and not even half of the kids got this one or that one right. And so I would suggest that you practice the ARMS acronym for poems and plays and passages and paragraphs, so that your kids can actually either act it out or draw pictures. And so the best one for letter number 26 would be G. And to fill it in, put my G over here. And just for those of you that are new to my videos, remember that odd has one vowel and 3 letters. So the first number on a test is odd. The next odd number is 3. And so odd numbers on paper tests are A, B, C, D. The opposite of odd is even. So you can tell your kids there are 2 vowels in the word even. So 2 is the first even number, 4 letters in the word even. 4 is your second even number, and then you skip count from there. And so all the even numbers on paper tests for now will be F, G, H, and J. Okay, now part 2 is, I don't like the bad example that they gave us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to show you using this Slinky, okay? And what I'll do for you is I'm gonna put the form in front of me, and I'm going to let you see all of me on the screen so that you can see me stretching the Slinky. And so for every word that you speak without punctuation, you would open the Slinky 1 inch. And even if you don't have a Slinky right now, and you won't be able to have a Slinky on the test if you don't have any accommodations, your kids could be reading their own answers open-ended and open their fingers without a Slinky, and they would not close it until they get to a period, an exclamation, or a question mark. They wouldn't bend it low unless they got to a comma, and they wouldn't bend it high unless they got to an apostrophe, a contraction, or possibly some quotation marks that are up there slowing. So we're going to have to stretch this Slinky, and it's going to go out of the screen because I'm about 6 feet tall. 12 times 6 is 72. Since the poem is 81 words long, plus the 2 words from the title is 83, and plus the 2 words from 3 words about the author, that's 86. So I would have to spread this out 86 inches before I could close it when I get to that period that we'll see at the very end. And so you can't see it because you can only see me here. Here we go. Here's the entire poem. Crunch, 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 crunch. I love the sound my feet can make when the leaves turn red and yellow and brown. And one dark night the wind blows hard, whirling, and brown, comma. I'm gonna bend it so you can see that comma, okay? Put one there, so I've got to say it. If I see one, I'm gonna say it. And one dark night the wind blows hard, whirling them onto the walks and streets where they tumble and gather in piles and drifts. And I'm only halfway through the poem. And what's going to happen eventually is if you buy these 6 for $1 Slinkies from Dollar Tree, they're going to break if your kids have too many run-ons. So I would suggest at the beginning of the year, buy the metal ones from Walmart or any toy store that has those bigger, like 2 or 3 inch metal ones, or they do have some large ones that are like two for $1 at Dollar Tree. Okay, so you're not gonna be able to see it except it expanding since I'm already past the screen. Just waiting for me and marching feet to come shuffling and cycling and stomping up and down, making a wonderful crunching sound, crunch, 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 crunch. Me and my dry feet and the dry brown leaves, period. Close it. Okay. Now, periods are pausable. You could have a yellow or a red. Make sure you can see both of these here. A red or a yellow ball. And if you did the same thing, you could bounce the ball on the table, any ball, for a short pause called a comma, and you would bounce the ball on the floor, a stop sign, for the period, the exclamation or question mark. Crunch, 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 crunch. I love the sound my feet can make when the leaves turn red and yellow and brown, comma, and they bounce the yellow ball on the table. And one dark night, the wind blows hard, whirling them onto the walks and streets where they tumble and gather in piles and drifts, just waiting for me and my marching feet to come shuffling and scuffling and stomping up and down, making a wonderful crunching sound, crunch, 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 crunch. And me and my feet and the dry brown leaves, period. And I bounce the ball on the floor. Okay. Now, the other one is running with run-ons. And so I'm going to do this sitting down so that you can see me. And you're going to have to imagine my feet. I'm going to be running in place, because a run-on is when you keep going and you don't stop for a period. And we only pause one time. After the 21st word, there's a comma. So we'll pause. As soon as I say 21, and I'll say comma, and then I'll keep going until I get to 81, and I'll stop and say period. And that in my binder is called running with run-ons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, comma. Pause for a second. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31, 32, 34, 35, 36, 37, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 49, 50, 51, 52, 54, 55, 57, 58, 59, 60, 62, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 77, 72, 73, 75, 76, 79, 80, 81, period. Stop. And so if you have lots of kids having run-ons and you do running with run-ons with your classroom, you're going to lose lots of weight this year. And so we had periods or pause a ball where we slow down to do something with the ball, bounce it on the table for a comma, on the floor for a period, exclamation or question mark. And if you happen to have a contraction, the contractions are up there in the air. So a contraction, an apostrophe, or an opening or an closing quotation mark, they're up there. And so you could slow the street down, the sentence down to do that. All right. Now, part 3 is, how do I, besides showing them that there's a big run-on, how do I teach my class to make sure that we can fix our mistakes? Because you can have an ending, but we'd also want to have a ER to take my paper to the editing and revising emergency room. You can have a conclusion, but I want to also fix the content and the conventions. So ending and ER, ending, editing, revising, or conclusion, then fix the conventions and the content, which is the revising. So I'm going to show you that when you teach a skill, the best, let me share something with you. For those of you who don't have the binder, I'm going to first show you my screen. If you go to page 138, and you can see it right there of the binder, you can see it has a verbalize your punctuation day running with run-ons aerobic style. And so it has an explanation on how to do those activities. And the reason I have verbalize your punctuation day before I have running with run is because I want to get my kids good at speaking with punctuation with their mouths, because it's a lot easier to talk than it is to write. So I can say, how are you today? Question mark, comma, I'm contraction fine, exclamation point. How are you? Question mark. Did you come to school late today? Question mark. Yes, comma, I did, period. What about you? Question mark. Well, comma, I'm contraction, I am very sleepy, comma, so I got here a little late, period. So you would just have a conversation. And so you could have grade-wide or school-wide a verbalize your capitalization day if you're only working on capitalization of phrases, and you don't pay attention to the punctuation, because I don't need to write a whole sentence to write my name. Capital Bill, capital Mac, capital Donald, capital Alamo, capital Texas, capital United, capital States of, capital America, capital North, capital America. We could verbalize capitalization because we're better at talking than we are at writing. So page 138 is that first activity. Page 139 has two more activities. The one that we did was called periods or pause a ball, bouncing with a ball. And page 141 has the Saggy Slinky, where you bend the slinky for a comma, and you keep stretching it until you get to a period. So wanted to make sure that those of you who have the binder saw that, so that you could use these activities in addition to whatever you're already using. And so what we'll do now is I want to show you how could I guide my students so that they could graduate from whole class to what we'll do class on these two. We'll pretend like we're dividing into groups of 3, 4, or 5 kids for this one. Then we'll have them get with partners on this one, and then we'll try to get them to do solo on the last one. Okay, so what I want is complete sentences, but for the sake of having punctuation in stanza 1, you don't have to put exclamation, but since I have 4 crunching sounds, I'm going to go ahead and put an exclamation after each one. Crunch, exclamation, crunch, exclamation, crunch, exclamation, crunch, exclamation. Okay. Now, I want you to notice that every other stanza has the word and several times, and that's a huge red flag for your kids. You can see it on the last stanza as well, that I only want the word and to be in the stanza one time in order to make a sentence. So if there's more than one thing happening, or more than one person or one thing being talked about, we want to make sure we only have and one time. So capital. I love the sound lowercase. See, what they did was they capitalized the beginning of every single line, and a lot of students do that. They sometimes capitalize the beginning of every single word. And so seeing this poem is going to cause your elementary, middle school, and high school students to take wrong pictures of what sentences, phrases, poems look like, and saying it out loud is going to record a video of me hearing it bad. So I want to fix this so that we can make a sentence that's complete after each red, before each red line. Capital, I love the sound my feet can make when the leaves turn red, comma, yellow, comma, and brown, period. And so we would have commas in a series that we could practice. And so we would practice as a class. Then you would get them to try it in groups. I'm going to cover up this and capital, one dark night, the wind blows hard, whirling them onto the walks and streets where they tumble. So I have to figure out how to get one and. So I have 3, 4 ands. And so we would try to challenge ourselves to say, how can I write this with only one or at the most 2 ands? So I'm going to try it again here. Capital, one dark night, the wind blows hard, whirling them onto the walks and streets where they tumble and gather in piles. And so I could say or drifts, or I could get rid of piles or drifts so that we only have and twice, period. Then you would ask them, okay, now try to graduate to just having a partner. I'm just waiting for me and my marching feet, my marching feet and me, my marching feet and I. We would make sure we understand to put yourself, put I in front of the verb and me after the verb, just waiting for me, my marching feet and me would be a better way. I'm just waiting for my marching feet and me to come shuffling, comma, scuffling, comma, and stomping up and down. So period. And so instead of using the word and, we could put an and sign, the little and sign right there. Okay. And if we go solo, making is a verb. So we want to have a who's making. It is making a wonderful sound, wonderful crunching sound. Because the sound that's being made is being emphasized right afterwards, we could put a colon there because we're not having complete sentences after this. Crunch, exclamation, crunch, exclamation, crunch, exclamation, crunch, exclamation. My feet and the dry brown leaves. And because that's a fragment, you got to figure out how to join this part that comes before the automatopoeia with this part that comes after it. And trying to figure out how to turn what sounds like fragments into complete sentences. And so what we want to do is, let's say that we can only get rid of half of the ands, then you've made progress. If we can get rid of even 1 or 2 ands, we've made progress. The goal would be, as they graduate from class to group to partner to solo, try to get rid of as many ands as you can, but still make the poem make sense. But for each stanza to have a subject and a predicate, that we don't have any fragments, that we don't have a run-on. So that's what I would suggest that you do. I hope that you can take some of these ideas and use them in your classroom. And basically, we're coming off the worksheet. We're using a sheet that works. I'm a person. So I'm using my mouth and my eyes and my hands to bring that poem to life. and I'm verbalizing, listening for um, the sounds. And so you could even have somebody in the classroom be only the sound, the crunching of the leaves. And so you could probably get a box of cereal and you could crunch the cereal. And so just to make the sound come to life. This is a third grade poem that was one big run on. So just you use your imagination. I think sometimes kids are tired, they're burned out. And so sometimes if we just change not what we're doing, but the way we're doing it, it will kind of do lesson plans, CPR. It'll bring our lessons to life just by utilizing total physical responses. And in the case of this poem, the 5 senses, where I get to see and hear, smell. I would love the kids. Everybody has to come tomorrow and bring one fresh leaf and one dry leaf, and maybe they can smell them and see if there's different scents, different aromas in the leaves, and they could tell the classroom what kind of tree that their leaf, their leaves came from. And that way the kids can learn. And then you could have this big classroom poster with all of the classroom leaves super glued with the name of the tree or the plant or a flower that that little leaf or petal came from. So just a few ideas. God bless you guys. Good luck with using your arms, where actors remember more stories and scenes and stanzas. Artists remember more stories, scenes, stanzas, and summaries. Take care and God bless.